Hello, and thank you for viewing this presentation for the CDFI Fund's Annual Certification and Data Collection Report for Report Year 2021. I am Michelle Dickens, the Associate Program Manager for the Certification Subunit of the Certification Compliance Monitoring and Evaluation Team. And I'm happy to be joined by Shannon McKay, Research Analyst within the Financial Strategies and Research Team. Next slide. The CDFI Fund implemented the annual certification report in 2016, and the report has gradually been updated over the years for clarification and/or the collection of additional information. The 2021 report is no different. Shannon and I will take the better part of the next hour to acclimate you to the use of the ACR. We will go through changes to the administrative policies in sections 1, 3, and 4 of the ACR, where significant changes have been made. Before wrapping things up, you will be reminded of what you need to work on for your organization's ACR. And of course, we'll leave you with the contact information to reach our respective business units should you have further questions. Next slide. If you've been wondering why the CDFI Fund requires each certified entity to submit an ACR, it provides a relatively quick way for the CDFI Fund to ensure that organizations continue to meet the certification requirements without having you to submit a full certification application. As you can see in the ACR, the data being collected is more than just the CDFI certification application requirements. The additional data collected helps the CDFI Fund gain insight on the trends occurring within the industry. Each year, a certified CDFI must submit their annual certification report within 90 days of the end of their organization's fiscal year through the CDFI Fund's Award Management Information System, or AMIS. It is imperative to submit and submit on time, because failure to do so will put the certification status in jeopardy, along with any awards an organization may have that depends on the certification designation. As of now, newly certified CDFIs are not required to submit an ACR until the next fiscal year after their initial certification. But stay tuned for any changes by staying abreast of future ACR notifications. Next slide. The ACR can be broken down into 4 main sections. Section 1, Organization Information. Section 2, Development Services Details. Section 3, Financial Data Detail. And Section 4, Financial Products Portfolio Breakdown Detail. Each section requires a response and/or data entry in order to submit the report to the CDFI Fund. You should review the ACR instructions prior to starting a new report, because you will need to analyze your target market, review your accountability mechanism, and have your financials available in order to respond to the questions therein. As mentioned previously, this presentation will cover sections 1, 3, and 4. We will not cover section 2 on Development Services Detail, as there have been no changes for the 2021 report year. Next slide. Up next, we will talk about the 2021 reporting year changes related to administrative policies. Next slide. As I mentioned briefly, the ACR is due within 90 days of the end of the CDFI's fiscal year. The date the ACR is due now displays on the reporting schedule, which is located at the bottom of the certification detail page in AMIS. Once you've become certified and begin submitting reports, you must continue to submit them every year without skipping a year. If you've missed the report year, more than likely your organization's certification status was terminated, and you will need to be certified again through the submission of a brand new certification application. As a courtesy, AMIS will send out email notification reminders 30 days and 15 days before your organization's report is due. If your ACR is overdue, you will receive a notification of non-compliance. In addition to those reminders, the fund will provide GovDelivery emails when a new report year is open, so please sign up for GovDelivery notifications on the CDFI Fund's website. We have received quite a bit of inquiries from CDFIs that have participated in the Paycheck Protection Program, otherwise known as PPP. The CDFI Fund recognizes that in this current environment, COVID-19 has affected the way in which lending has been conducted. There may have been some level of financial products provided outside of the CDFI's approved target market. The CDFI Fund has included questions and a few data points to gather more information on how certified entities' target market financing has been affected if they participated in the Paycheck Protection Program. And I'll talk about that a little more in a moment. Next slide, please. The following screenshot illustrates the location of the reporting schedule information on the certification detail page. This page includes your organization's certification status, the fiscal year, the fiscal year end, the month, and the date. The CDFI Annual Certification Report section is where you create each new report, and it will display the consecutive ACRs along with their statuses. At the very bottom, outlined in red, is the report schedule, which displays the report year, status, and the due date. As you can see, this report status is overdue, and the submission indicator is a red alert. Once the ACR is submitted, it will become green again. It will become green, not green again, but green, have a green check mark, provided that the organization's certification was not terminated. So pay attention to the reporting schedule and make sure that this is indicated green to show that you have submitted your report and submitted it relatively on time. Next slide. Up next is the 2021 reporting year changes related to Section 1, organizational information. Next slide. Within the 2021 ACR changes to Section 1, organizational information, there are several significant changes. The first one you will find is in the target market attestation section. An additional question has been added for whether or not the CDFI has engaged in PPP activity. If you select yes here, you will be required to enter a PPP-related record in the financial product portfolio breakdown section. Shannon will go into more details about that momentarily. Second change is a more expansive set of answers to choose from for the target market attestation question and revised hover over help text. This expanded set of answers provide more clarification to capture PPP-related activity. Another change you'll find is the revision of the hover over text for the if no explained target market question. So as you're analyzing your target market data, you will use this guidance and the guidance provided here and in the 2021 ACR materials to guide your explanation. The next change is the addition of an approved target market link. This link will open up the page that details your organization's approved target market. As you are analyzing your target market data, you should affirm your understanding of your organization's approved target market with what's listed here. If by chance you find a discrepancy, please send the service request to CC&Me, which should include a copy of your last approved determination letter that you have on file, and staff here at the fund will make corrections as necessary. And lastly, for the target market attestation subsection changes, We've also eliminated the choices in the pick list for 2006 through 2010 eligible tracts as an answer to your choices in the data set used. Only the 2011 through 2015 data set remains because as of October the 1st, 2019, everyone was required to use the updated data. So, as you analyze your target market data, specifically if you have been approved for an investment area, be sure to use the correct eligible tracts. If your investment area no longer qualifies under the new data, a target market modification may be necessary. This may also apply to credit unions that were using the streamlined certification process. New to the 2021 ACR is the subsection Regulator Attestation. This new subsection has been added and is tied to pre-populated regulator call reports data for selected financial data fields. And Shannon, again, will provide more information on this change. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides will illustrate the location of the changes I've just mentioned, with each one outlined in red. Starting on the left, PPP activities attestation, a more robust target market attestation pick list, the link to the approved target market, and on the right, the data set used, which again are all located within the target market attestation section of the ACR. Next slide, please. I must reiterate, please use the accompanying guidance to help respond to the questions within the report. You can also use the hover over text for more context to the questions. So when we focus in on the PPP activities question, this question requires a yes or no response. If your CDFI has originated loans in connection with PPP during the last calendar year. Let me rephrase that. If your CDFI has originated loans in connection with PPP during calendar year 2020, your response here should be yes, and more information will be required in the financial products portfolio breakdown section. For the purpose of CDFI certification, financial products excludes forgivable loans unless they've been pre-approved by the CDFI fund. Given that PPP loans in some cases can be forgiven, the CDFI fund will allow CDFIs to count PPP loans as small business activity when made to approved target markets or eligible markets to meet the 60% requirements temporarily. This temporary exception applies to the PPP loan activity that was conducted during calendar year 2020 only. And I'll define eligible markets in a related slide. Next slide, please. Next, we see here the target market attestation questions hover over help text has changed to reflect the additional choices in the response pick list. You will respond to whether or not the CDFI is meeting the required 60% to one or more target markets. The help text reads, at least 60% of the organization's transactions are directed to currently approved target markets and eligible markets in accordance with the CDFI fund's policy and guidance. The pick list options, yes. At least 60% of the transactions in both number and dollar in the last fiscal year were to clients in the approved target market. This question applies to both non-PPP participants and PPP participants. The approved target market is the map and the description identified in your most recent CDFI certification or target market modification determination letter. You may also use the handy link provided that I'll speak to in a moment. The next option, yes, at least 60% of transactions in both number and dollar in the last fiscal year were to clients in the approved target markets and eligible markets that are not part of the CDFI's currently approved target markets. This response is for PPP participants only. So what is this eligible markets that I speak of? The CDFI fund defines eligible markets as a geographic area meeting the distressed eligibility requirements, or individuals that are part of our automatically approved populations of low income as defined in the regulations, or African Americans, Hispanic, Native American, Native Hawaiians residing in Hawaii, Alaska Natives residing in Alaska, or other Pacific Islanders residing in American Samoa, Guam, or other Marina Islands. The next option, no, less than 60% of transactions in both number and dollar in the last fiscal year were to clients in the approved target markets for non-PPP participants. Or no, less than 60% of transactions in both number and dollar in the last fiscal year were to clients in the approved target market and eligible markets that are not part of the CDFI's currently approved target markets for PPP participants only. Any PPP activity that must have taken place during the calendar year 2020 to be considered an eligible financial activity for the target market attestation question. And for now, this provision is only applicable for the ACR 2021 reporting cycle. Next slide, please. Either no responses requires the respondent to describe the change and ability to meet the target market test. Pages 21 and 22 of the ACR guidance provides a template for you to use to help you describe the issue. The template, we hope, will also allow the CCME reviewers to make quicker determinations to reaffirm the ACR. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the approved target market link that I referred to earlier. And for your convenience, it will take you to the next screenshot. Next slide, please. Here you will see the target market name, which is the name of the associated map in SIMS, the description of the approved target market, and the type of target market. I will also recommend that you go back to SIMS and review your maps associated with the approved target markets. Next slide, please. And lastly, here's a screenshot of the dataset used pick list, the dataset used pick list showing only one choice, the 2021 through 2015 eligible tracks. Make sure you're using the correct dataset in your SIMS map and refer to the American Community Survey data guidance on our webpage. You will find the link to the ACS data conveniently located on the next slide. Next slide, please. And just a couple of quick reminders. Your target market attestation responses are based on originations during the recent fiscal year end. That means you're only analyzing those transactions to determine if you're meeting the 60% requirement in both number and dollar to the target market. And if you're participating in PPP, you are allowed to include those eligible markets I defined earlier. You must use the 2011 through 2015 ACS dataset. You may use the hyperlink on this slide to access the Excel spreadsheet to determine if census tracts within your investment area qualifies. You may also check the associated target market maps and SIMs. If you determine that your investment area no longer qualifies under this data set, particularly if you're using a customized investment area that's comprised of both qualified and non-qualified census tracts, you may need to request a target market modification. And target market mods are submitted through AMIS and can be submitted at any time or in conjunction with your ACR. The target market portfolio data is not related to the target market attestation determination. Target market portfolio data is based on the full portfolio. Target market attestation data is based on originations closed during the recent fiscal year end. This is a very simple yet very important distinction because we have no 60% requirement for the target market activity of your portfolio. Okay, I've done enough talking. It's now time to bring Shannon into the conversation to provide information about regulator attestation and the change to sections 3 and 4. Shannon?
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon McKay, and I'm a research analyst at the CDFI Fund. And my portfolio includes the annual certification and data collection report. As Michelle briefly mentioned, we have added a regulator attestation question to section 1 of the ACR. The screenshot below shows you what this looks like initially when you start your ACR. And this attestation question only applies to certain regulated entities, including credit unions, cooperativas, banks, and thrifts, and deals with select data fields in the financial data section that we have pre-populated with regular call report data. Therefore, this section does not apply to bank holding companies or depository holding companies. And as your screen says here, you do not answer these questions in this section until you have finished the financial data section of the ACR first. Next slide. This screenshot shows you what the regulator attestation looks like after you click the Save button on your first section of your ACR. And now you're ready to answer the section's questions because you have completed the ACR's financial data section. So your first step is that, you see this, you should read it. It outlines for you what are the fields that have been pre-populated by the regulated data, and it's broken up by the different types. You can see the different fields that are populated for banks and thrifts versus the fields that are populated for credit unions and cooperativas. So you can read this section, and then your next step is that you would then click the Edit button to answer the section's questions. And again, you only answer these questions after you have completed your financial data section of the ACR. Next slide. So, after reading the section's text, which describes the data fields as being pre-populated, you need to then answer the regulator attestation selection question, which is either a yes or a no. By answering yes, you are agreeing with the accuracy of the pre-populated data values in the financial data section. By answering no, you are not agreeing with the accuracy of one or more of the pre-populated data values in the financial data section. So after you make your answer choice, then we move on to the next question, which is a checkbox, which acknowledges the note that says that you understand that your review of your ACR submission may be delayed if you have answered no to the regulator attestation question and did not attach supporting documentation in the related attachment section. After you check this box, your next step is to click the Save button at the bottom of the subsection. Next slide. If you answered yes to the regulator attestation question and checked the note box, and you've completed all other sections of the ACR, then you can go ahead and submit your ACR. If you answered no to the regulator attestation question, then you need to go into the related attachment section and attach the appropriate documentation as illustrated in these screenshots. So when you click on the related attachments section, what will pop up is the first screen, which asks you about attaching your file. And so what you'll do is you'll browse on your computer to where the file is located that has your proper documentation that explains why the pre-populated financial data values that you see on your screen are incorrect. And so you need to then document for us what should be the accurate values. And so this documentation could consist of an amended call report file that you filed after the publicly available data was released on the website, on your regulator's website. It could be some revised financial data statements. So there's some options open, and you can learn more in the guidance that we have provided. So you'll select where your file is located. Then you'll, under type, you'll select the regulator attestation documentation type. You can add a brief description if you'd like, and then you click attach file. And then once that's done, if you only have one document to attach, or if you have several documents to attach, that you'll just follow the same step, and then you would just click back to your annual report. Next slide. So this slide summarizes what the steps are in the process that I just went through with the individual screenshots, as well as what happens after you submit your documentation. So as I said, you're going to first complete your financial data section, look at the values that were pre-populated, if there are any that are correct or incorrect. If there are find ones that are incorrect, then you need to come to the regulator attestation question and you'll answer no to it. And if you answer no, then you will need to attach documentation to support your requested value changes. After you then submit your ACR, CDFI fund staff will look at that documentation. They will make a judgment whether it's valid documentation and supports making those changes. If it's done, then you will later see, once you've received notification that your organization's ACR certification has been reaffirmed, you can go in and you can look and see, yes, they accepted my documentation and my accepted values, and you verified that the changes were made correctly. However, if you go in and you look and you find out that there has been an error in us making those changes, then you need to submit an AMIS service request detailing the error and the appropriate corrections to be made. I will also caution you that our data is only as good as the data that we get from the regulator for these data fields. So if you say that your organization's ACR ends up having errors in the financial data fields that we got from the publicly available regulator data, then we encourage your organization to contact your appropriate regulatory agency and alert them to the data errors so that they can then take the appropriate steps to make corrections for future public data releases. Next slide. Next, I will be reviewing the 2021 reporting year changes to Section 3, also known as our financial data section, and then following that up with Section 4, the financial portfolio products breakdown detail section. Just a reminder, everything that I'm going to go over today is detailed in the technical assistance materials found on the fund's website. And specifically look to the ACR form instructions document and the AMIS training manual for the ACR document. Next slide. The changes to Section 3, financial data for the 2021 reporting year, can be grouped into 5 sets of changes. And the 5 sets are revised introductory screen for the section, the inclusion of enter, beginning, and end dates for your reported data, additional validations and indicator flags, required explanations for negative and zero values, and then the pre-populated data fields for certain regulated entities. For each of the 5 sets, I will show you the series of ACR screenshot examples to illustrate the changes. Next slide. We began with the revised introductory screen to the financial data section. This is the screen that will appear after you click the new financial data button on the CDFI annual certification report detail page. And there are a few changes to note about this screen. First, the record type is now set for the financial institution type and tax status in your AMIS org profile. If this is correct, then just hit the continue button to keep moving on. If the type shown is incorrect, click the Cancel button and submit an AMIS service request asking to have the data fields in your AMIS org profile updated to the correct information. As a refresher, there are 5 types of records for the ACR financial data section now. The first is bank or thrift. The second is depository institution holding company. The third is credit unions, which also involves cooperativas. Fourth is your loan fund and venture capital for-profit status. And fifth is the loan fund and venture capital nonprofit status. Next slide. The next change is adding data fields for you to enter the beginning and end fiscal year dates for the financial data used to complete this section. This addition provides a data quality check and assists us in tracking that the correct time period of data is being used across CDFIs. We have implemented some rules in regard to the time period of the data, and that's what I'll go over next. First, the fiscal year end date should be on or prior to the date that you're entering data into the form. For example, if today's date is October 23rd, you cannot enter an end date earlier, later than that. So if you do, you will see an error message shown in the screenshot. So for example, in this screen, it's showing that the period end date must be on or prior to today's date of Thursday, October 22nd, 2020, when this screenshot was taken. Next slide. Second, the time period of data being reported on cannot exceed 12 months. So, for example, if you set 2019, January 1st as the begin date, and then enter February 1st, 2020 as the end date, you will see the error message shown in the screenshot, alerting you that your time period exceeds 12 months. Next slide. Third, the time period of data being reported on cannot be less than 12 months. For example, if you set January 1st, 2019 as the begin date, and then enter October 31st, 2019 as the end date, you will see the error message shown in the screenshot, alerting you that your time period is less than a year. Next slide. The next set of changes deal with the addition of more validations and indicator flags with an eye towards improving data quality and better understanding the relationship between financial data values for a CDFI, which appear outside of standard norms. The screenshot on this slide illustrates what happens when a CDFI enters $50 million as their value for a current assets data field, and then enters $5 million as their value for the total assets data field. These data values violate the AMIS validation of current assets must be less than your total assets. As a result, you will receive a validation error message which tells you which validation rule was violated. If the values are correct, then an explanation of at least 20 characters is required in order to save the financial data section. And that's what you would put in your open text box there. If the values are incorrect, then you just go back to the respective data field and enter the correct value. Next slide. The screenshot on this slide shows a sample of the indicator flags that may appear after you click Save in the financial data section. You will only see this screen if you did not have any validation error messages to begin with, or you made corrections or provide an explanation for any error message that did not appear. Green indicator flags show that the AMIS validation rule was met. The orange or yellowish color flags, indicator flags, show a warning where an AMIS validation rule was not met. Next slide. The next group of changes focus on financial data fields with negative or zero values. We want to better understand why a CDFI is entering these specific values. Based on the explanations that we receive, we may make changes to certain financial data fields. The changes implemented for the 2021 ACR reporting cycle also align our financial data instructions with those of the CDFI program applications for more consistency in our data collection efforts. First, all numbers related to a CDFI's financial data must be entered as a positive whole integer, greater or equal to 0, so no negative values. We are aware that some financial statements will show allowance for loan losses and leases, also known as ALLL, and total charge-offs as negative values. As a result, we ask CDFIs to convert these negative values into positive values. However, if you forget to do so, then AMIS will make the conversion for you and alert you of the conversion through a pop-up message. For other financial data fields where you enter a negative value, AMIS will convert these negative values to a 0 value and then ask you to select a reason from the list of pull-down options for why the value is 0. In the case of a negative value on your financial statement, you would select the actual numeric value is negative. The next series of slides will illustrate some examples. Our first example involves entering a value of negative $5,000 into the allowance, loan, and lease losses reserve data field. So as you can see, there's a negative 5,000 there inside the box in red. Upon entering the negative value, a pop-up message will appear, letting you know that AMIS is going to convert this negative value into a positive value for you. So next slide, we now see that the positive $5,000 is in the ALLL space, and this is what will end up being saved. Next slide. Here's another example involving negative values. In this example, the CDFI enters negative $5,000 as the value for restricted cash and cash equivalents data field. As a result, the user receives a pop-up message telling them that the negative $5,000 will be recorded in the system as $0. It tells them that they're going to need to enter a reason, and it suggests that possibly that reason could be that the actual numeric value is negative. The user is then required to provide an explanation for this 0 value, which in this case would be that the actual numeric value is negative, unless this was sort of a typo and you need to correct it in other ways. Next slide. So far, our focus has been on negative values, but you're also interested in learning more about why CDFIs enter a value of 0 as their answer for financial data fields. To gain a better understanding, we are now asking CDFIs to select a reason from a pull-down list of options for why they entered a value of 0 in the financial data field. If none of the listed reasons are appropriate, the CDFI should select Other, Please Describe, and provide an explanation of at least 20 characters in the open text box. Next slide. Here's an example of these new rules. So, what if a CDFI enters 0 as a value for restricted cash and cash equivalents data field? They will then see a pull-down menu highlighted in red appear below their answer. You are required to select a reason from this list. If you end up selecting Other, Please Describe from the list, then here is what the open text box looks like, and you're required to provide your alternative explanation of at least 20 characters. Next slide. The last set of changes to the ACR financial data form involves the use of pre-populated data fields for certain regulated entities. These pre-populated data fields relate back to the new regulator attestation section that I described earlier as having been added to Section 1 of the ACR. If you are a bank, thrift, credit union, or cooperativa, then you will have certain financial data fields pre-populated with data obtained from publicly available regulator quarterly call reports. And the list of fields relevant to each type of regulated financial institution type is shown on this slide. And again, as I stated earlier, pre-populated data fields will not be applicable to depository bank holding companies. Next slide. If you're one of the regulated entities mentioned on the previous slide, you will find certain financial data fields to be grayed out when you open your financial data section of the ACR for the first time, as shown below. You can see the data field's label on the left, but you cannot see nor enter a numeric value into the space on the right side. So for this case, I'll go through a couple examples. So here you see what it looks like for a bank or thrift, where they have unrestricted cash and cash equivalents, average assets, and then allowance, loan, lease, losses reserved, and total assets are grayed out. On the next slide, you can see that there are different fields grayed out for a credit union. So in this case, we have allowance, loan, loss, leases, reserve, and total assets, total liabilities, and total net worth are grayed out. After you have completed all of the other financial data fields in your section and hit save, then you will see a new screen appear showing that the grayed out financial data fields now have numeric values in them based on the numeric value we obtained for that field from your regulator's quarterly call report data. So in this case, we're showing what it looks like for a credit union. These are the data values that you'll need to review the numeric values for and make note of any that may be incorrect. Using this information, now you can go back to section 1 and answer the regulator attestation question and acknowledgement note box. So if you see errors in these values, then this is where you would then end up going back to the regulator attestation question in section 1 and answering no. If all of the pre-populated data values are correct, then you would answer yes to that question. And in both cases, you would still check the box where you acknowledge the note about what happens when your failure to submit an attachment may lead to delays in the reviewing of your ACR. Next slide. Now that we have wrapped up the changes for section 3, we will move on to discuss the changes for section 4, the financial portfolio products breakdown detail section. Next slide. To track any Paycheck Protection Program PPP activity, we've added PPP as a type option when you select loans as a financial portfolio product in this section. Once you select loans and then PPP, you will be asked to complete number and dollar amount for your total portfolio, as well as the number and dollar amount for your target markets. As a reminder, you should only select PPP as a type option if you answered yes to the PPP activities question in section 1 of the ACR in the target market attestation section. If you try to select PPP when you answered no, you will receive an error message. If you entered no by mistake, then you should go back to your section 1 of the target market attestation and change your original answer to yes, and then come back to section 4 and enter your PPP activity question. Next slide. Here's a screenshot of how the PPP option appears in the pull-down menu of options for type. So you see it's down there at the very bottom. Again, I will remind you that all of the changes outlined or discussed today can be found in the ACR technical assistance materials on the Fund's website. These materials provide additional details, including step-by-step instructions, as well as screenshots. So check out the links to the AMIS ACR manual, the ACR FAQs, and ACR form instructions. This concludes the overview of changes to the ACR for the 2021 reporting cycle. I will now turn things back to Michelle for a wrap-up of key reminders and how to reach out for assistance. Michelle?
Great, thank you, Shannon. I have just a couple of important reminders before we wrap this webinar up. Again, for the purpose of CDFI certification, financial products excludes forgivable loans unless they have been pre-approved by the CDFI fund. Given that PPP loans in some cases can be forgiven, the CDFI fund will allow CDFIs to count PPP loans as small business activities that were made to approved target markets or eligible markets to meet the 60% requirement temporarily. So again, this only applies to activity that was conducted in calendar year 2020. And in case you're wondering if PPP activity counts as loans for the purposes of the financing entity test, yes, PPP activity can be counted as loans for the purpose of the financing entity criteria. Also a reminder that ACRs are due 90 days after your most recent completed fiscal year end date. Put that on your calendar. It is important. You will receive reminders, but just in case you miss it, it's on your calendar. And if your organization has not had any changes that affect the criteria for certification, do not include any unnecessary attachments. It will slow down your reaffirmation process. We do not require you to include your financials or your strategic plans or anything extra unless there was changes. So don't add any unnecessary documents. And lastly, I implore you to make sure that all of your contacts in AMIS are up to date so that you can receive all the notifications that are sent out. Last slide. So if you need to reach out to CCME, the AMIS support team, or to FS&R, we encourage you to use the AMIS service requests that are outlined here, but there are a couple more options for you to use. You can send us an email or give us a call on our help desk. And on behalf of the CDFI Fund, we would like to thank you for taking the time to review this webinar, and we hope that you find it and the related guidance documents helpful. So be safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.